Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, creatives of all ages, to the 3D Motion Show NAB version. For a lot of you who've been tuning in online, we are now back to our live events, and I couldn't be happier to see so many of your faces. I see a lot of people who've been here many years ago, and a lot of new ones as well. Hey, brother, good to see you. So we have an amazing lineup as usual, but a little bit unusual is it's, in person, which is super exciting. But we have an amazing lineup of artists, creatives showcasing how they're using Maxon One products in their workflows. And to start it off today, we have the one, the only Travis Ragsdale. Let's give him a big round of applause.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming out. All right, we're good. So today we're going to be talking about how to create a generative art project using Xpresso in Cinema 4D. Before we dive in, I'm Travis Ragsdale, like he said. I'm a 3D artist. I've been using Cinema 4D for about 7 years. I worked with clients like Callaway, Jägermeister, Facebook, Google, some others, and now I'm doing an NFT project full-time. So it's called AlphaBot Society, and it's on the Crypto.com platform. So before we jump in, I'm just going to share my reel quickly, and we can watch that from 2021. 2020. Thank you. Yeah, that was very long. Okay, so what is a generative art project? For those of you that don't know, basically in the NFT space, it's a project where you can create a set number of attributes and then generate a much larger group of final one-of-one NFTs from those attributes. So for my project, AlphaBot Society, we had about 130 attributes, and we were able to generate 10,000 unique PFP NFTs. So that is that. So this is some samples from AlphaBot Society, my project. It's 10,000, like I said, and it's on crypto.com, so feel free to check that out. Here's some examples of some popular generative projects you may have seen, like the Bored Apes, or the CryptoPunks, or the Doodles. This is one that I really like, the Invisible Friends, and then Mechaverse, and then these ones at the bottom are samples from AlphaBot Society. So yeah, there's a lot more that kind of goes into generative projects, like community and utility and things like that. But today we're just going to sort of talk about the creative process of making something like this in Cinema 4D. So start off with the planning. That's like pretty much the most important thing to do when you're starting this project, is determine what's the style. How do I want this to look? What are the different attributes? Like, what's going to be the attributes that make up a PFP or an NFT in the final, renders? How many do you plan to have? What are the attribute groups? So for AlphaBots, we did attribute groups where every attribute could fit with every other attribute. So it was basically creating these robots, and they have head, body, arms, body accessory, head accessory, things like that. So it's really determining like what are those groups, and then you can kind of go through and create as many attributes as you want. So that's sort of a tip, is start with the groups and then determine what those attributes would be. Another thing is, if you kind of look at the AlphaBots, they all have, each one has its own color scheme. So a color scheme is made up of like 3 to 4 or 5 materials, and that is applied to the entire PFP. And then other projects would do where you have sort of like different objects with different colors and it's all mismatched, which is cool. But personally, I just creatively wanted to have kind of control of the color scheme of the final PFPs. So today I'm going to show you just a quick modeling of an attribute. We'll do some lighting and octane, and then we'll show the Xpresso rig that I kind of use. Basically, it's a simpler version of the Xpresso rig that I built for AlphaBots, and then we're going to use some basically a spreadsheet and import that as keyframe data into Cinema 4D to do the final render. So let's hop over there. So I'm going to be modeling an attribute. I'm going to do the just one of the heads. We're going to make some little robots, and we're going to do one of the head attributes. We don't have time to model everything. Obviously, it takes quite a bit of time. So, all right. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start off with a shape sort of like this. Let's go into our front view. We'll just scale it down about that size. Hit C to make it editable, and then go to point mode, grab these points, scale them down, hit Control A to grab all the points, scale it like that. Yeah, that looks good. Just trying to make a little hexagon, or a, what's that, parallelogram shape. Okay. Let's go to spline, and we'll chamfer these points so it's a little rounded like that. And then I'm going to, with that selected, hold Alt and put that all into a sweep, and then hold Shift with that sweep selected and drop a rectangle in there. Okay. And this will be like the border of our head. So let's make it a little thicker and add some rounding to it. Okay. All right. And then we're going to take this same rectangle and just Control drag and make a copy. Before we go any further, I want to create a null for all of this so we can group it together. And I'm just going to call this 00_head, since this is going to be the head attribute of the group 00. So that'll make more sense once we see the project file with all the attributes already built. But yeah. All right, so let's hide this border for a second, and let's just create another rectangle, make it a lot smaller, hit T for scale. This is going to be like a mouth So we're gonna go to the front view, make this a bit taller, add some rounding like that. And then I'm gonna put this in a cloner holding Alt with that selected and just create a couple copies of this. Okay, that looks good. Make a couple more copies, get rid of those. And then for this, I'm just gonna make all this editable. So actually, I think this should be a bit smaller. We'll move it down about there. And right click on the cloner and then connect objects and delete. So now it just pushed it into one singular spline. I'll put that below the rectangle and then grab both of those and hit Alt and Control, and it'll put them both into this spline mask. And then we're going to do A subtracts B, so that's going to subtract B from the A spline. And that gives us a sort of spline with a cutout, and we can add that into an extrude, so we get this sort of mouth there. And then I'm just going to move this up like that and give it about 10 in the depth. Okay, so that's good for the front of the face, and then we're going to duplicate that, and that'll be the back of the face. So we can just take this rectangle and get rid of everything else, and then pull this one back, so it's like that. There we go. And for this one, we can add some rounding. Yeah. Okay. Next thing we're gonna do, let's go back into the front mode, front view. Let's take this rectangle and I'll control drag it out, make a copy, and just scale it down. This is gonna be our eye, so just grab those points on the right, drag them over, grab these points, drag them over, about like that. Go back into object mode. Probably good right about there. And we're gonna make another spline for the eye. So this is gonna be like a cyclops. So drag, put that in a sweep, holding Alt, holding Shift, put another rectangle, just making a little border for this eye. And then let's get a little deeper, add some rounding to it. Good. And then make a copy of that, pull it out, and put that in an extrude. That'll be sort of the front of the eyes. And then the eyes border. Just trying to name things and not incredibly organized on this, but yeah, let's give that just one depth and then just kind of move it forward so we can add the glowing material to that. Okay, so these are the eyes. This is the base head. And then we've got, let's make some little rivets to go on the head. So let's just hide that for a second. Hit T for scale, scale this down, make a little rivet shape here, or like a bolt. Give it one height segment and 6 rotation segments, little hexagon, and then add some segments there, and add a radius, so it looks something like that. Well, then let's go ahead and turn this head back on, and just holding Alt, put that into a cloner, and we'll call this rivets. And then it's going to be an object mode, so there. And then let's grab this rectangle that we used for the original head border and just put that in there. So they're kind of in there right now, so we need to change the orientation. Yeah, I think X, and then we just need to go to the cloner and hit transform and push them out so that they're outside of the head. And then we want to just do the distribution of them instead of count. We'll just do it as even, and it'll create a couple rivets around the head. And I think we want to do 11, I think. Yeah, looks good. And I'm just going to scale this up a little more, something like that. Okay. And then I'm going to, with this cloner selected, hold Alt and put that into a symmetry. Make sure that it's on the XY axis. And then you can grab the cloner, pull it forward. Oh, wrong axis, I think. Pull it forward. Oh, yeah, you have to, because it's referencing a spline, you can't actually move the cloner, so you have to move it using the transform tools inside the cloner. All right, so that looks pretty good. Maybe a little further. All right. Okay, almost done with the head. Let's go ahead and make some antennas, and then we will move on. So I'm just going to start with this sphere, hide the head for just a second, probably about that size. I'm going to just group that right now, call it antenna, put it in here, make sure to name this rivets. Let's just turn that on, and then put a cylinder in here, scale it down, move it up, give it some height, and then let's control drag and create another one and make it a little more short like that. Okay, and grab both of these, and we don't want any height segments, but we'll do 24 rotation segments. And then this top one, I'm just going to add a little bevel to the edge, something like that. And let's give this sphere 48 segments, smooth it out a bit. Okay, and then I'm going to just, in this group, hold shift and add a helix. Change the axis, make sure it's going the right direction. T for scale, scale it down. Start it about there. And then let's move the height so that it reaches up to the top. And the radius could probably be 6 and 6. And add some more rotation to it, get a little spring, and then we'll just put that into a sweep with an inside, and then scale that inside down. You could also adjust it right here, maybe make it, let's see, 2. Yep, and then give it a few more segments. Looks good. All right. And then let's turn the head back on. Put this antenna, holding Alt, into a symmetry. And then we're going to grab the antenna and move it over somewhere right about there. Move it up. Oop, push it back. Maybe we'll grab that sphere and make it just a little bit bigger, like that. And then, yeah, we can rotate that sort of like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, so that's the basic head mesh. So let's move on, because I think I'm doing okay on time. Actually, yeah, we have a little bit of time, so I'm just going to make a neck really quick. Add a cylinder. This is pretty simple, straightforward. You just move it down like that. Make sure it's not intersecting with those screws, and then we're going to make another one, scale it down a bit more, and maybe do a cloner. And we'll just do no X and Y clones, just or X and Z, just Y. So we'll do 5 and make them, let's see how far apart. About like that. And then just give both of these cylinders some more rotation segments, no height segments, and add a fillet there. And then we can just group that and call that neck. Okay. So then that is like, just a super basic kind of process modeling a little robot head. I made a couple more, and I'm going to skip over to that project file now so that we can kind of get going on some textures. Let's see, all models. Okay. Oh. There we go. Okay, so basically what is in this project file is unhide everything. We've got 3 heads, 3 arms, 3 bodies, 3 headwares. So you can kind of see like all the different types. Oh, gotta turn that off. All the different types. I've got arms 1, 2, and 3. Got the same thing for the heads and the bodies and the headwear. So what we're going to do is turn off all but one of each attribute, just so we can kind of see a more complete robot here. So I'm going to just kind of randomly pick the bodies, headwear. We'll do that. Okay, cool. So I'm going to create a camera so that we can kind of get this framed up. and it's already a square, which is what I want. So I'm going to do the camera. I'll probably like zoom out pretty far and do kind of like an isometric look. So maybe do a super high focal length and zoom out. It gives like a very isometric-y kind of look, which is what I want. So think about like that would probably be good. Let's add a octane camera tag to that. Oop. Can't seem to get that. Okay. And then, yeah, so I think we're going to do some materials, but before we really dive into that, I'm going to just set up the lighting so that we can kind of see how that interacts with the materials. Uh-oh. Did we... here we go. Okay, don't need that anymore. So I'm just going to start the render. First things first, these settings are not default, but normally this would be direct lighting. And this is Octane render, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know. I set the samples at 540, the GI clamp to 1, and then the adaptive sampling, I just turned it on at default. So just quick settings. So to edit my lighting, I typically go out to this view, which would by default be the top view, and I just go to perspective so that I can kind of move around and the Octane view will stay the same. So first thing I'm going to do is add an HDRI environment. And in this, I'm going to put a texture I have loaded up. Okay. C4D textures. This is a grayscale Gorilla from GSG Plus HDRI, one of their metal HDRIs, which looks really nice. Definitely check out that if you haven't. So I'll probably just put it somewhere like this is kind of the fill light, so put it like an ambient, turn it down to like 0.5 power. And then let's go ahead and create a targeted area light. And I have the Octane Sky selected, and that makes it the target, which I think is just a little cleaner than having another target object since our target's going to be in the center. So this will be our key light. If you know anything about like 3-point lighting setups, that's basically what we're setting up here. The key, the hair rim light, and then the fill light is the sky. So for the key light, I'm just going to have it nice and big to make those soft shadows. Turn it down, probably to around there. When I'm adjusting lighting, sometimes I also turn the other lights completely off so we can just see the influence of this light by itself. So maybe turn that down to like 15, make it a little bit bigger. Okay. And then I'm going to make a copy, holding control, dragging that down. Call this one hair light. Oh, hair light. Okay, and then I'm going to move this one behind the character here. Move it down, and let's turn off that key light so we can just see what this is doing. I'm going to move it back some and probably make it a bit smaller. And then probably more powerful, so like 50. And maybe I'll make it a little taller, actually, a little thinner. Okay, so now we have our hair, our key, and then our fill. So that looks pretty good. Basic 3-point lighting setup with Octane. Cool, so next we're going to create, well, actually, I'll do a little camera adjustment here. So I'm just going to group these lights in a null, call it lights. And then in my camera tag, I'm going to go to the camera imager and turn that on, and the post-processing and turn that on as well. I'll just put a LUT of some kind, like that one in there, just to give it a little bit of color. And then I will turn up the highlight compression a little bit, and the post-processing will do like 15 in the bloom just to give it a little bit of ambient glow around it. Cool, so that's our lighting and camera done. I'm going to pop open the materials hot corner here and create some new Octane materials. So what we're going to do with the materials is we're going to create 3 materials, which makes up a color scheme in the color scheme attribute group. So let's just start off with one, make 2 copies of it, and call this 00 primary, and the 00 is basically the color scheme. It's color scheme 0, so 00 secondary, and then 00 tertiary. It's really important to name these things properly so that it stays organized when you go into Xpresso and start setting that up. So in the primary, I'm just going to give all of these a random color so we can kind of see which ones they are when we're applying it to the materials. And then I'm going to also create 3 mix materials, so octane mix material. And this is basically going to be the material that actually gets applied to the objects. And then we're going to use this material input to determine the switching between the different color schemes. So let's just start off by naming these primary, secondary, all right, and then tertiary. Okay, and then let's put these in the respective mix materials. So we're just going to use material 1, and then we're going to grab all 3 of these mix materials and turn the float value to 1. So it's just referencing that material 1 input. Cool, so let's go ahead and just apply this to our objects, and we'll just see, it basically just applying it to the different parts. So I know all of these, the tertiary I plan to be sort of a metallic-y kind of material, so I'm going to do all of the silver parts as that. So all of these inner parts on the arm are going to be that tertiary. This could be, this piece right here could be tertiary. That could be secondary, and then primary. So we're basically just texturing these with those placeholder materials, and then we'll adjust them as we see fit. So let's go to the head, do the main, let's do the neck as this material. The head will have the primary, secondary. That inner is actually, I put a mesh in there to just have a black material on it. So let's go ahead and make that. That won't be a dynamic material. That's just going to be a material that's applied kind of across all of them. And then we'll have a glowing one as well. So let's add emission to that one. And then in the black material, we'll just turn it down to black. And that'll just basically make that look as if it's sort of empty in there. Okay. The eyes, we'll do the glow on that part, and that's way too bright, so we can go in there and go to the emission channel and just click surface brightness, and it'll sort of dim that down a bit. And then this sweep, we can just do the secondary. I gotta move that. All right. And again, we're applying these mixed materials, not these materials, to the objects, because these are going to be dynamic. So the rivets could all just be that silver color, and then the antennas will do this inner part as that silver. The sphere can be the primary, secondary, and primary. Okay. So that's our head. And then let's just do the body real quick and the head accessory. So for these bars back here, I'll just do the tertiary. For the ring on the neck, I will do the same. The shoulder, same. This inner part in here, I'll do that as well. And then I will do the primary right there. Or actually, let's do the secondary one. So just drag that over top and replace it. Okay. And then the headwear, we're doing this antenna that I made. So that'll be this base cylinder could be the primary. And then this rounded part right there could be secondary. Then we'll have the little squiggly thing be the tertiary. And then we'll do the glow on the sphere. Okay. So that's all textured. Now we can sort of adjust this. Not going to go super in depth on that. I'm just going to do a quick texturing on this. So let's get the node editor. up, and we'll put that here. Oh, I want to put it right here. Okay, so I'm just going to jump over there. All right, so for this primary, let's make this like a pinkish red color, just kind of ad-libbing this. We'll add a texture, image texture into the roughness. I just want to use this crust, also from Grayscale Gorilla Plus. So that'll be there. You can kind of see that a little bit if I jump out of my camera and kind of zoom in. It's a little easier to see, potentially. Just adding some roughness to the edge there. Make sure the projection is either triplanar or cubic or box or something like that, because you want to make sure that these materials work on all of the objects that you're creating. So that's another thing to kind of remember, is you're creating generative artwork, so it needs to kind of work regardless of what the model is or the texture is. Kind of everything needs to work together. So let's go ahead and do another texture here, and we'll grab the scratched texture. Cool. And put this in the bump. Probably going to need to turn it down quite a lot. Yeah, it looks a little crazy. So I'll invert it, and then I'll turn it down to 0.01 or 0.1. Should be good. Yeah, so you just get some scratches on there, and then let's pump that same projection in there, so it's just displayed differently, and then we can do a transform on both. I'm going to go to like 0.2. Okay, and then I'll maybe turn this down to 0.05 or something like that, just maybe even 0.01. Yeah, so just want a little bit of scratching kind of on that. So let's just take all of these nodes and hit Control-C to copy, go into the secondary, and then paste. And we'll just paste that on the roughness and the bump. And you can kind of see that applied right there as well. But let's switch out the materials we're using here. So for this scratches, we'll just use a different scratch material or texture. And then for the roughness, we'll use a smudges texture. So just a little bit of variation. And now that looks pretty good on the scratches you can see there. I think that's good as it is. And then we'll just go to the diffuse channel, and maybe let's make this like, yeah, something like that. Kind of an orangey. Oops. My bad. Yeah, so that looks good. Something like that. And then we'll go to this tertiary material. And I wish I had a little more space here, but it's okay. Paste those same nodes in and put it in the roughness and the bump. And we'll just do the same thing again. I'll go to the bump, replace the texture with this first one again, and then choose a different texture for the roughness. So we'll go with that one. Okay, and then for this one, I'm just going to go to the index and just bump that up to make it a little more metallic-y. You can kind of see that there. And then, we'll turn the diffuse down a bit more, make it, I don't know why that keeps happening. Yeah. Actually, I think it's because I need to exit that. There we go. All right. So I'm going to skip now to a project file that has all of the textures done. Don't have time to sort of go through and iterate, but I'll basically just open that and then explain what we're looking at. So go to here, all textures, save this in live. Okay, so let's turn on the Octane live viewer, and it looks pretty crazy. Basically what this is all of those objects turned on. And then I've got 3 material groups, which is like the color scheme. So we've got like this green and yellow one, red and orange, and then a blue and purple one. And that's applied to all the objects. And then we've got the primary actual mixed materials that are applied are in here. So those are applied to all those objects. Okay, so we're going to make sure that everything in these subgroups is turned on. So the display is just set to default in these little stoplight things there. So make sure everything is on, which it is. And then we're going to turn the main group off. The reason for that is we're going to be using instances. And if you instance an object or reference an object with an instance and that object display is off, the instance won't display the object. So real quick, I wanted to talk about the global positioning of all of this. So every attribute has to be at the same global position as the other attributes in that group. Because we're basically, so for example, the arms, the global position of all of the arms is at 0, 0, 0 in the rotation and position. And that's the case for all the arms because if you're referencing, you're using one instance to reference the arms and they're in different positions, it'll use the position of that instance rather than the position of the original object when referencing it. So just make sure everything is set to the same position as the other attributes in that group and you'll be golden. I'm just doing it at 0, global 0 for position rotation because it's easier to just kind of make sure everything's at 0. So again, let's turn that off, and then we will create an instance. Cool. So the instance, we're going to have 4 of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to call these arms, head, body, and headwear. Okay, and then grab all of those and just hold Alt-G, put them in a group, and we're going to call this rig. So this is going to be our Xpresso rig null. So let's first off start by adding some user data. So we'll click on the null on this little menu here, go to user data, add user data. And they were basically creating 5 outputs or inputs that we can enter the numbers corresponding to those attributes in. So we're going to have 5 data points. This one is going to be arms, and they're all going to be real. So they'll be real numbers, and it'll be a float slider, makes it a little easier to control. And then it'll have a minimum of 0, maximum of 2, because we have 3 attributes per group. So it's 0 is index 1, and then 1 is index 2, and then, So let's make a couple copies holding control and dragging. When you see that little line, you let go. We need 5 of these. This one's going to be head, body, headwear, and then color scheme. All right. Okay, perfect. So now if you go to that rig null, you'll see this user data input, and you've got these little inputs. And this is actually really useful if you don't know about Xpresso or user data. This is nice to have just to be able to control anything you want. So that is good. I think we're moving on to, the Xpresso setup. So I'm going to right-click on that rig null and go to Programming Tags and add an Xpresso tag. And this is just going to be our Xpresso editor. So we're going over a super basic Xpresso setup. So if you've never used Xpresso, don't be afraid. This is super basic. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag that rig null in here. That'll be all of our outputs. So make that a little larger. And then to drag in these actual inputs, we're just going to grab them and move them to this bar on the right, because that'll be where they come from. Same thing there. Drag the body, the headwear, and then the color scheme. Okay, and then next thing we're going to do is grab all of these instances and drag those in. So we've got arms, we'll have headwear, body, head, arms. Okay, and for each of these, we want to have the input be the reference object. So I'm just going to drag that for each one. For the head, and this is the thing that we're going to be controlling with our rig. So just going to set that up. And then we also want to have these 3 materials. So we'll have tertiary, secondary, and primary. And the input for those is going to be this material 1 slot. So for the primary, make sure we've got the right one selected, the material, and grab that. Secondary, same thing. We're going to drag this here. Tertiary, same thing here. Okay, so now we've got all those inputs and outputs set up. I'm going to pause that. We're using one node. In my rig, there was quite a few more, but this is the main one that rules them all. So the one node to rule them all. It's called the link list. This is a cool node where it basically takes an index input and outputs a list of objects based on that index. So in the link list node, if you click on it, we've got our list, and we just drag the objects in here, and the first one is index 0, second one is 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And so these inputs are going to be controlling that index, and then that is going to basically pipe the proper objects into those reference objects and materials. So we're going to need 7 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Okay, so let's pop the objects that need to go in there. So first is going to be the arms. The most important thing is that you just do them in order. So you could either lock this, grab these 3, and then move them in. Whoops, my mouse is messing up. Okay. Or you can just grab we'll grab the head, and we can just do them one at a time. So grab that link list and do, head 0, head 1, head 2, and just make sure they're in order because that you'll know that you're referencing the proper ones. Same thing with the bodies. We'll drag those in. And also make sure you're using the correct list. So body, then headwear. Let's do that. So grab that one. Headwear 0, 1, 2. Okay. And lastly, we'll do these color schemes. So this is for the primary. So we're going to drag primary 0, primary 1, primary 2. For the secondary, same thing. Secondary, got it, 0, 1, 2. Tertiary, 0, 1, 2. Perfect. And now we just connect all of these, and you'll see that the objects will start popping in as we connect. There's our arms. Because these, if you watch the instances over here, they're starting to change the icon because they're actually having something to reference. Oh, that one is in here. Watch the body will pop in. Oh, these little strings. Okay. Boom, there's our body. Headwear. How are we doing on time? Okay. Yeah, pop that in. Color scheme, make sure these are going. And so the color scheme is actually going to have the same input because primary 0, secondary 0, and tertiary 0 are all basically 3 materials part of the same color scheme. So same input, different outputs, so that you don't have to change the number more than one time for the color scheme. And you could separate those out. You could have 3 colors, that has color 1, color 2, color 3, and they're separate inputs, and that could give you a lot more randomness. But for our sake, we just wanted to do it like this. So done with Xpresso, actually. Let's pop back in that. Make sure we've got our, I think it's, I'm missing my texture here, so I'm just going to go, nope, data, no, C3. There we go. Fix the lighting up a bit. Okay, so this is fully operational now. We have our rig. I'm just going to close that stuff down and go in here, and you can see we can just twirl these values, and it'll change all of those parts. So obviously this is, and the color scheme works as well. Takes a bit to update in the viewport because it's Octane, but it updates pretty quick in the live viewer. So all of these are working. We can do any random combinations. So the next thing I'm going to talk about real quick is the data. So if I go to that, basically with this data, what we did is for AlphaBots, my partner and I essentially created the data for all these attributes, referencing the numbers that we needed to reference for those indexes, and then used random functions to assign basically a single combination for each frame of the final animation. So it'd have a head value, an arm value, body value, headwear value for each frame. And we can set the rarity or the scarcity of those objects beforehand, and then essentially you get this big list of data. So that looks something like this. Just open it. Yep. So the first value is going to be frame. Second value is arms, then head, then body, then headwear, then color scheme. So this is basically just a CSV document that looks pretty boring, but it's actually really cool. A lot of math goes into creating it. So that is what we're going to be using to import into Cinema 4D as keyframe data. So this is actually a really cool feature of Cinema that I have used a number of times in a number of different ways. So let's open up the timeline, the dope sheet timeline. Yep. And we're going to go and just on frame 0, let's go extend this back to frame 0. I'm just going to create a keyframe on our user data for all of these. So we just got one keyframe. That one isn't going to matter, but we just wanted to have it in there. So selecting the rig, we're going to do this ASCII import. So that we will navigate to the data and grab this CSV, and it's a comma separated value CSV document. So do comma, real numbers, and then first value is frame. That's that first column was the frame number, so it knows how to time out the keyframes of the rest of the data. And a little thing with this, every time I do it, I have to do it twice, and then it works. So nothing popped up. I'm going to do it again, exact same way, comma, first value is frame. I know they're working on fixing that bug. And then import was successful. Boom, there's all of our keyframes. And you can kind of visualize what that looks like. It's just bunch of different values randomly placed for the different attributes. So let's jump back into the dope sheet, and I'm going to grab each of these and hit copy. So with arms, copy, and then paste it up here into our actual rig. So the lower part is the data, and then the top part is the rig. So head, we'll do the same, copy, head, paste, body, copy, body, paste, headwear, copy, headwear, paste, color scheme, copy, color scheme, paste. Okay, and then we can actually just delete these extra data points. We don't need that anymore. And yeah, so that is working. So it's basically each frame, you've got a different iteration of this combination of bots. Here's what they look like from this final render. So although they may look sort of similar, they are actually all completely different or completely unique. Not one of them has the same combination of attributes. Obviously, something to keep in mind with this type of project is the more attributes and the more variety you create, the better the more variation you'll have in your final pieces. So we have 3 of each attribute, and we only have 5 attribute groups. Doesn't allow for a lot of variation, so you'll see a lot of them do look pretty similar. But with the AlphaBots, we had 60 color schemes. We had 10 head types, 10 body types, 10 arm types, head accessories, body accessories, collars, neck types, eye symbols. We had little legendary attributes like the spear and the little flying robot. So the more variation you create, the more variation, or the more attributes you create, the more variation you'll have in the final render. So just something to keep in mind. Like, we had a very small sample size here, but still ended up looking pretty cool. We've got a bunch of different little cartoony looking bots here, and yeah, I think that is pretty much the technique for me. I think I'm just right on time. So. Let's go to here. Yep, so those are my links if you need to get in touch or check out any of my work. Thank you. I love you, David. Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great
so
job.
much.
I was going to call for a round of applause, but I guess you did your thing, so good job.
All right.
we have a couple questions online, as we do. For those of you who don't know, and this is your first time, interacting with us, we run this whole thing live. So hello, internet, at the 3dmotionshow.com. So check us out, 3dmotionshow.com. You can see the schedule. Everybody was asking about that. You can see the schedule, as well as we have thousands of dollars of prizes from our sponsors. So go ahead and log in there, and we'll be giving those out too at the end of the 3D Motion Show season. So questions from the internet, and then if you have questions too, we'll take those as well. But the first question, internet says, Dear Travis, no. The question is, were the 10K rendered automatically using takes or tokens, or was it brute force? I hope it was automatic.
Takes or tokens? No, so it was basically frames. Like, it was just rendering frames. Like, I set it up that way because they were static, like stills. So I just, had 10,000 frame project, and it just rendered.
So
like that.
Okay, so just 10,000 frames.
Yeah, within the same project file. So it was automatic. It wasn't, like I wasn't using multiple project files or multiple takes, but yeah,
just one render,
still took
10,000
quite a while.
frames.
Yeah, still took quite a while. Yeah.
And then somebody was wondering, how did you generate the CSV file?
Okay, so that's a little bit above my pay grade. I should have brought Cody, my partner on AlphaBot Society, with me. It's like fairly complex. Like you're basically, you list out all of the attributes that you have, and then you assign a rarity like ranking to them. So, this one is like 0.05% of the 10,000 will have it, and this one 5% of the 10,000 will have it. And then it generates a random, list of 10,000 based on those sort of rarity guidelines.
Okay.
And then it spits out the sort of final data that I can then import.
So the rarity drove everything else.
Yeah. So the rarity is sort of like, this material is going to be more rare. So just pick which ones you want to put it on, computer.
Okay.
But, like it's going to be more rare. So only 50 of them will have it or whatever.
Yeah, so then the other question is, along the same lines for the project, was the CSV algorithmically generated or manually selected for each frame value? So
yeah, it's algorithmically.
It was all through the algorithm of just rarity.
Yep.
Well, there you go, Internet. Your questions have been answered.
Yeah.
Do we have any live questions here for Travis? Well, I guess the Internet's live too. So you are live too. You matter too, Internet. Any other questions here for Travis? This is your opportunity. And if you are feeling a little bit too shy, which is fine. I know it's the first time seeing you in a long time. Travis will be in the back for another hour, so you'll be able to interact with him directly and ask him questions above his pay grade about CSV files and algorithms like that. So let's give him another round of applause, and stay tuned because we're going to have our next presenter up, Brian Kim. So you're not going to want to miss this one. Call your friends, tell them to tune in. You're in for a treat. So see you in just a moment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.